gang, I thought I'd talk today about the great building blocks of a robust pocket knife collection. So this isn't going to be telling you absolutely every pocket knife to get, it's just more categories and definite experiences that would really make your collection a well-rounded one to have any of these knives in it. So I'm just going to shoot broad across the whole spectrum of knives, and I'll be specific in some instances, but in others I'll just sort of let you know what to look for. So basically I don't even have all these knives. I've got some, but this is what I would think would be a great starting point for a knife collection, to have perhaps a bit of experience with every kind of knife, and perhaps then you might want to branch off and focus on certain types. So let's get started. And I thought for the beginning it would be wise to start early in knife design. So I think it's really important to experience a couple of traditionals, at least in the beginning of your knife collecting career, or just midway if you've never tried them. Definitely something to check off the list. This here is a pretty standard penknife pattern. This one's a Great Eastern Cutlery number 74. But even something like a Case Trapper, a Sodbuster of any variety, even just going to an antique store and just picking out an old knife that looks like this, just to sort of know and experience and feel what knives used to be like pretty much until the 1940s at least, is a really, really good idea. So traditional patterns, this is just a pretty standard clip point, penknife, or I guess that's a old skinning or spaying pattern or something like that. Something like a Barlow knife, which is a two-bladed knife, a Trapper knife, which is another two-bladed knife, a Sodbuster, which is a sort of similar design to this one, just with a different blade shape. All classic patterns and really good to have. Some of them will lock, others will just be slip joints. Not a big deal, but I think bone handles, carbon steel, a great thing to have started on or experienced in your collection at one point. Expanding on that, I would suggest a Buck 110, which is probably where pocket knives started to go, from all being like this to being, eventually the modern knives and tactical knives that we have today. So a Buck 110, which I don't have here presently, but I have had in the past, is a great stepping stone and definitely a great cornerstone of a pocket knife collection. After that, I think it's a great idea to get a couple of Swiss Army knives. Now, I'd recommend a traditional Celador handled Swiss Army knife like this with just a handful of tools. This one's an Explorer, perhaps a Spartan or a Tinker or a Super Tinker or something like that. And then also one of the aluminium oxide models like a Cadet or a Pioneer or something similar to that. Sort of all to show everything that this Swiss Army knife field really has to offer. Moving on from that, I think the next sort of batch of knives are like the regional knives. So these are like this for the West, like America and England and stuff. Very colonial knives. The rest of these knives are kind of like what these were, but for the other cultures. So the one I have on hand is the Opinel. This is kind of like the people's utility knife in France. And then so then you've got things like the Kudu knife, which is the African kind of general knife. You've got the Duke knife, like a Polynesian, again a French piece of cutlery history. The Mercator, German origin I think, one of the earlier locking knives going. The Lael knives, the B knives from France, really, really good, just knives to have in your collecting experience. Then we move on to sort of more modern knives, and there's obviously a huge amount of modern tactical knives that are all flooding the market. There's about 5 or 6 that I would say like the essential ones to have, just to sort of have the complete story of that type of knife design. So modern tactical knives are generally going to be using your modern materials and your one-hand opening mechanisms and things like that. So the one that kind of started it all, and not obviously the first one, but the first big one was the Spyderco Endura back in the late 80s. This one here is, it's a modern version of that old Endura, which used to be, made of AUS 6 steel and or ATS Gin 1 steel, sorry. Just the very next knife after the Spyderco Worker, I believe. Used to be sabre ground, so this is the full flat ground model in FRN with ZDP 189 handles, so it's really quite space age materials now, but the Endura is really one of the knives that started kind of a bit like the 110, Buck 110, just the next sort of iteration from that in pocket knife design, so also a great place to start. Moving on, and there won't be too much Spyderco in this, but they do have a fair few hallmark designs. I think the Paramilitary 2, simply from being a popular knife and just a very well regarded knife, is a great one to experience as well. The compression lock, really, really cutting edge sort of modern non-flipping folder, paramilitary too, and also a Benchmade 940, I think, another sort of real staple knife for a knife collector to have experience and whatnot. Moving up again, I think it's, if you ever can, I think, and I don't own one, but I think I've got one here on the table, so I think a Chris Reeve Sebenza is definitely worth, this knife's probably worth about as much as all these knives, and it's funny, but it's, probably good to own what is commonly regarded as the pinnacle of production knives, and whether it is or it isn't, it's not really for me to say, because I haven't, unless you've experienced every factory knife, you can only really give impressions, and this is a very, very well made knife. I can see that, having handled it for a little bit now, but I think it's a great, if you can get one of these into your collection, I don't think it'll be leaving, and I think it is a really, really fine knife to have, and just to experience the Sebenza, the cult of Sebenza, and see what it's all about. Another one I think is something that's essential is an Emerson knife. I think Emerson make a completely different style of tactical knife, much more aggressive, much more sort of viewed as you view it the same way as you'd view like a hammer or a screwdriver or a saw. They have a lived-in feel to them. I've got one on the way, but I don't have one to share with you now. But you've probably seen Emerson knives in the past, and they are different again. So just a different point of contact with the tactical knife field. And then I think it's cool to have one frame lock flipper, usually titanium. Titanium frame lock flippers, there's definitely the dominant area of the market right now. And this one's a Kaiser Gemini, a great place to start. Spyderco Mantra, Lion Steel TRE, there's a bunch of zero tolerance knives, there's a bunch of other knives. But yeah, lots of good titanium frame lock flippers out there. I'd say the Kaiser is a really safe choice without breaking your bank too much. So that's sort of your basic tactical batch. I have obviously the most because it's my field of interest. So that's kind of where I'll stop there. The next sort of category is kind of like your oddities. So these are the things that you'll probably either have to spend a fair bit of money to get, or have legal issues that might stop you from getting here. But I thought I'd mention them anyway. So beginning with the oddities, I think it would be really cool to have like a Balisong, an automatic knife, so one of those types of knives. Like I say, I don't have either because they're impossible to get into Australia almost. Automatic knives, something like a Benchmade Infidel or a Microtech Halo or something like that. And then like a good Benchmade 87 series Balisong or something like that, just to see what they're like, just to experiment with. I would love to have them in my collection if I could. I can't say I would branch out into them full time, but I'd love to at least have something on hand just to have a look at and just to know that type of style of knife. Next thing, I always like the idea of having one giant knife, just for like one tiny knife and one giant knife. So I've got a giant knife here as the Spyderco K2. Perhaps something like a Cold Steel XL Voyager, or even an Espada if you want to go crazy giant, but just something big and silly and just frankly really, really fun just to have along, I think is a great thing to add to your collection as well. And then I think it's also a really cool thing to, at one point in your career, and I'm sure I will at some point, can't quite see myself getting there just yet, is to get a fully custom knife. Get someone to make you a knife, whether it's from one of their pre-existing patterns or whether it's from something that you've completely thought up and designed yourself. This will be the most expensive thing in your collection, but I think it would be really worth doing, having a really good custom knife. Pick a maker, do your research, really make an experience of the whole process, and really get a nice, tailor-made custom knife. I'll do it one day once I've got no other financial barriers to spend $2,000 or something like that. I probably will do it one day, but certainly nowhere in the near future. And failing that, or in partnership with that, I think a nice mid-tech or just a really nice strange knife, which will probably be a mid-tech like this. This is the Classic Butcher by Andre de Villiers. This is a classic knife, not a classic knife, a mid-tech knife. And alternatives to this might be a Grimsmo Norseman, or a look at those knives Nick Shabazz has, a Graham Razel, something, a VDK. What's his called? War Admiral, something like that. They're the same pattern but with variations and lots of input from the actual physical person doing it. So I think that's a really cool thing to have in your collection as well. So yeah, just something really left of center, something that's, you know, your strange knife in your folding knife collection, I think is really cool to have as well. So, and last thing I think is important to get something like a knife that is purposefully not very good. For just something that sets the bar really, really low, just a worst knife. Now, I haven't really got a worst knife. My worst knife isn't a terrible knife, it's just a bit of a cheesy knife. And it's this is Ganzo. I got a few of these sent from Ganzo to review a while back, and it is just, you know, it's a bit of a rip-off of a couple of other designs, and you know, it's pretty rough, plasticky feel. It's definitely my poorest knife at the moment. Not horrible, but definitely my most average knife. And it's good to have something like this in your collection as well, just to you remember what, you know, everyone else is buying, what all the people are buying from, you know, the blister pack section at your local big box store sort of thing, and just to know how much better all of these are, quite frankly, to what is available for people who don't do any research whatsoever. What do you think I've missed? I'm pretty sure I would have missed something obvious. So I'm thinking, even looking at this table now, I think an Ontario Rat 1 is probably a bit like the paramilitary, but for the lower cost knives. Sort of a really high quality budget knife might be something as well that is worth having. And I think the Rat 1's pretty much, you know, of its own in that sort of section of the marketplace, or the Rat 2 if you are actually going to use it and have small hands. But really, the knives I've mentioned, the ones on the table and the ones I've just spoken about, I think makes a really robust base collection. You may well trade some out, whatever, but I think experiencing all the knives I've spoken of really, really will help sort of build your experience and build your tastes to get knives that you really enjoy later on. So there we go. Hope you've enjoyed this little chat